Welcome to Firefighting Today, the weekly video roundtable discussion show where we discuss all things fire service related. Firefighting Today is a production of PeteLamb.com. And now your host, Chief Peter Lamb.
Hello and welcome to the weekly roundtable. Here we are. We've got a good panel for you tonight. We're talking about some things. We're talking about rapid intervention, the expectations versus the realities. And we'll go anywhere we want because that's sort of what we do here on the show. A couple of logistical things. If you are watching us live on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, you can go over and use the live chat. You can interact with the panel that way. That's a good way to do it. If you happen to be watching us on Twitter or using Twitter while you're watching, feel free to use that as a way to interact with us as well. That would be a good thing to do. So, with that said, let's introduce our panel. We'll start with Chief Hall. Charlie, say hello to the audience. Charlie, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. My name's Charlie Hall here in West Warwick, Rhode Island, retired Chief Fire Officer.
Joe Pernesti.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Pernesti. I'm with the City of Elyria, Ohio Fire Department near Cleveland. Been on about 29 years, and I'm currently Assistant Chief Ship Commander.
Okay, very good. Chief Cagno, say hello.
Hi, everyone. Chief John Cagno, retired at North Providence Fire Department, 30 years on the job, and I'm happy to be here once again.
Okay, good stuff. Lane, say hello.
Yeah, hi, Lane Woolery, Battalion Chief with City of San Diego Fire Rescue, and also a Twitter handle at Suncoast Chief. Okay,
yes, you are a Twitter guy. And then certainly last but not least, an old newcomer. Welcome back, Rob Fling. Rob was on most of our early panels, and we're glad to have him back.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. Thanks, Pete, for having me back. Rob Fling, past chief, Dix Hills down on Long Island, and looking forward to tonight.
Excellent, excellent. So let me just set the stage a little bit. What we got is, rapid intervention. There are a couple of schools of thought about rapid intervention. A lot of people have strong opinions on either way. People have opinions on effectiveness. People have opinions on, their duties and so on and so forth. So Lane kind of sparked this a little bit. So Lane, why don't we start the discussion off? Talk, throw some stuff out there so we can see where it goes.
Well, there's a couple, like you said, there's a couple of schools of thought. One is, do we really need to have them there vis-a-vis? Can we afford to have the idle capital, 3 or 4 guys standing around when there's maybe work to be done? And this is especially true for departments that have staffing issues as it is. And then also the actual efficacy of the rapid intervention team as opposed to Mayday firefighters being mostly rescued by what it's typically called proximal resources. In other words, the people that are working right next to them are the ones that usually make the rescues.
All right, well, let's just start there. Let's run the panel. Rob, do we need to have a rapid intervention team in place? I mean, reality standpoint, I know what standards say. I know what OSHA says if you're an OSHA state and so on and so forth. But I guess the first question we ought to discuss is, do we need to have that team in place? Is it worth having the people as a standby company?
I have no problems with a rapid intervention team, honestly. I think they're a good, what if to have available, just in case something gets a little sideways all of a sudden and it's outweighing your resources to a bit. But with that being said, I have no problems putting the rapid intervention team to work if I have that amount of need for people right away. And I just bring another one in. So it's one of those play-by-ear things. Do I think that we need them? I think it's a good idea. But are they flexible to a certain part? Yeah, I think everything on the fire ground needs to be flexible to some part.
Well said. Well said. Thank you, Rob. Chief Cagno, what? Let's stay on where this is going. Do we need them on scene? How? What do we do? How does it work?
I kind of agree with what Chief Ling said. I think we need to be a little bit flexible with it. You have to always have some presence on the fire ground. In the event that something does go wrong, you have the personnel to be rapidly deployed to at least locate the trapped firefighter. Whether they can effect a rescue, that's a whole different story. But I agree. I think you need to be a little bit flexible. My department, we used to use an on-deck company in addition to a fast company, if need be. So you had somebody that could be rapidly deployed to do whatever, as well as the fast company or RIT company.
Well said. Well said. Chief Pernesti, what do you got? What's your thoughts or opinions on this?
Well, there's no doubt we need to have some crew standing by. I kind of think the older veterans, the veterans of the fire service, though, you look at it and you almost feel like bamboozled. But RIT became such a big thing in the late 90s, mid 90s. And you look at it now and was it just the fire service? Did we just have to have companies there because incident commanders forgetting to have enough people on scene to assist? We got to have them, but was it something that kind of expanded into this big thing that for books and for that kind of thing? Controversial, but we all know a smart commander resources at the command post. Do they need to have the Stokes basket and saws and all that? No. How about they throw some ladders, get some lights going, and a hose line ready to knock down some fire? Anyway, I just kind of think that RIT was something that just kind of got loaded, and a smart commander never really had to worry about it because they had the resources available.
Interesting point. Well said. Chief Hall, what do you got? Do we need them on scene? What are we doing with them? What are your thoughts about what Lane said?
Put me in the corner with Chief Cagno and Chief Worry and Chief Fling about having a dedicated RIT company. I was trying to do that myself, get a RIT company established, but back up what Chief Pernesti just said, I wasn't adverse to giving them some small ancillary duties and throwing a ground ladder, getting a hose line in place, maybe even a little bit of outside venting if it needed to be done, as long as they could be deployed quickly. But as far as a dedicated RIT team, yes, I'm solidly in favor of it.
Yeah, and of course, there's the obvious that, it is the standard of care. I mean, failure to have a RIT team in place today certainly comes with a passel of trouble, certainly because of some of the standards and whether or not you're an OSHA state and all of those kinds of things. There certainly is a standard of care. Just a quick question. Let me just run the panel real quickly. In your world, when you assigned a RIT team, how many people was it? Charlie, what did you have? A 3-man company? What was the RIT team?
Minimum of 3.
Chief Pernesti? Chief Cagno? John, you're muted.
Three to four.
Okay. Lane?
Yeah, 3 to 4.
And Rob?
Minimum of 4. Most of the times it's 6. Full ladder company.
Nice. So you have the resources, and I was probably 3 unless you felt the need to assign multiple companies to make the team. We ran 2-man engine companies. A 2-man engine company is not a RIT team. we might assign it that, but you need somebody else to go with it, certainly, to be able to do that. So I think that's I think that's a good point. John, do you want to just expand a little bit for the viewer, the difference between what you're calling a RIT company and an on-deck company? Do you mind doing that quickly?
Yeah, a RIT company or FAST company is a dedicated company, firefighter assistance search, rapid intervention team. That company would be staged. They would have, like Chief Fineschi said, Stokes basket, hand tools, a RIT tack, thermal imaging camera, minimal stuff, usually 3 to 4 people. And then we would also have, really used, but it was in our policies and procedures, you could have a standby or on-deck company. That company was designed to be at the command post and at the disposal of the incident commander to do anything that he felt necessary in rapid order. In other words, if they needed a quick line, if a company was getting beaten up and they needed to back them up, you could use them for that. Additional ventilation, perimeter support operations, throwing ground ladders, maybe removing barred windows. You know, so basically they were an unassigned company outside of staging. They weren't part of the staging company. So if you had a full first alarm assignment in staging, the standby or on-deck company would be right at the command post and to be utilized in the event that something had to be done in rapid order outside of a Mayday.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. It's funny when we talk about the on-deck company, I think of a very controversial fire chief that was an instructor here in Rhode Island years ago. And at some point he said to me, listen, kid, if you want the best piece of advice I could ever give you, keep an engine and ladder in your pocket. You know, that's what he meant. And this was long before RIT was a term or whatever. He just said, keep an engine and ladder in your pocket so that you had something if something went south. And I got to tell you, I mean, that was over 30 years ago. And it's funny how, you know, probably still makes sense today. So as you explaining the on-deck company, it's very similar. Lane, where do you want to go? What do you think?
Well, and we could certainly discuss the, you know, there's an old saying that if you put out the fire, there's very little need to have to dive out of a window. And so again, I guess it comes down to, you know, when we started our rapid intervention, originally our residential response was a 3-1. Well, they added a pump, so it became a 4-1. And the expectation is one of those 4 pumps will be your rapid intervention crew. And it's expected that you assign that. Of course, there's the rescue exemption. And that also, you know, if you want to delve into the whole 2-in, 2-out piece for the first driving company, but that's almost a whole different bag of worms. But just in terms of, you know, some people will say, hey, if it's a residential house, until we search it, I'm operating under the rescue exemption. The language and the policy that I operate under is a little more restrictive. I need something a little more substantial, either reports or things that a reasonable person would presume the house to be occupied to vacate the rescue exemption.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Are you finding, Rob, you must have faced this battle, I'm sure, is that, you know, and I'm not going to get into every building needing to be searched. I think that's not where I'm going. I think you do have to clear a house. I think a primary search is necessary. I don't want anybody to fall off the chair here, but you obviously do need a primary search. But did you find that most companies would go to work under that premise, whether it was under the rescue exemption? Very well said, Lane. What are your thoughts on that, Rob?
As far as somebody delaying search of the building?
No, somebody is always going to search, and the rapid intervention team, in other words, there's no 2-in and 2-out. We're going in because it might be a rescue.
You know, the 2-in, 2-out is a little, I don't want to say bizarre to me, because we generally don't have that problem. I mean, maybe in the middle of an afternoon, if we caught a fire, but at that point, the cavalry's coming, and we would probably do some type of exterior attack at that point until we had the resources to go in. But you know, we don't delay search. You know, we generally run as an engine company and a ladder company, and the engine company has no problem searching off the line. You know, if we're a little short, or we may send the initial truck to the floor above. If we have a small fire on the first floor, the engine company will clear that floor. Just like before, you know, I mean, SOPs are great. And I've said this 100 times, SOPs are great, but you know, they're not the written law. Sometimes you got to move things around a little bit to get the job done.
Well said. I think that's true. Yeah, 2 in and 2 out. Lane's right. That is absolutely another discussion. I mean, it's not. You know, that is the genesis of an argument that sounds like, why don't I just take those other 2 guys and go put out the fire? We're gonna get to that from the standpoint of RIT too in a minute, but I think that's certainly the case. Anybody want to add anything to that piece? All right. So what does the rapid intervention team do? Are they strictly standing by? Do they have a cache of tools? What, where do you want to go with that? What are we all doing about that? Chief Cagno, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, over the years, I taught numerous rapid intervention classes, and I've taken numerous rapid intervention classes. And the odd thing about it is the way the different departments address what tool cache should be available for the RIT team. I've seen departments put out a huge top, have, you know, besides the usual stuff, they'll have a hearse tool and a bunch of other things, you know, and they might have maybe 3 or 4 people. That's a rescue operation. I think that when you think of a rapid intervention company, it should be bare bones, stuff that they can actually carry in with them. Simple stuff, set of irons, a hook, obviously a personal rope, rescue rope of some type, a RIT pack, additional hand lights, battery operated Sawzall, great tool, gets you out of a lot of different situations. But, you know, I've seen some of the most efficient equipment to the most bizarre. And I don't think there is even a standard as to what should be at the ready, if you will. You know, is there a bare minimum? And you know, then you got the exotic out there. So.
Okay. We had a discussion. It was 1 or 2 weeks ago on the panel, and I'm gonna lean over to Chief Hall for a minute. And the question was, I think I made a statement that said, in my world, we didn't have enough manpower to be the rapid intervention company, so it was going to be a mutual aid company. We did a substantial amount of work training together. We did you know, I think we went a step further, which I was very proud of, is not only do we train the rapid intervention crews that would work together on a very large scale multiple times, but in fact, we also trained the incident commanders several times of all the mutual aid departments. Charlie, you had strong feelings about using your own company if it's possible. You want to just kind of recap that for us?
Sure. It's my belief, and then I did make a chat comment, it's my belief that the company or companies that you assign to RIT should be those that are the most familiar with this city or town. They're going to be the ones that are most familiar with the occupancies. As much as they're going to want to go to work should the need arise, and a staging company or mutual aid companies put the work in place with them. Basically, it's my feeling that the local jurisdiction should supply the fast company, as Chief Cagno calls it, because again, they're most familiar with their surroundings. They're most familiar with the types of occupancies they're dealing with. And I do feel very strongly about that. And you know, and I'm gonna finish this by saying whether they like it or not.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, there's still some resistance. I don't want to be the RIT company. I want to go in. I want to do something. Yeah. So well said there. Lane, dive in.
Well, yeah, and there's also the matter of our policy is it's the host agency whenever possible. And part of that is because of the different SCBAs. That generally speaking, we most have similar, but there are some differences. And you know, obviously with the universal air connection in the RIT bag, but still with we have buddy breathing attachments on our Scott 4.5s that, you know, an adjoining agency that's responding with us on automatic aid may not have.
Yeah, SCBA compatibility and all of those things. I started down the path last week when we were talking about, you know, interoperability being misunderstood. And there's a home run right there, is breathing apparatus and how compatible. I would say, and I you know, unless I hear anybody saying different, I think that most rapid intervention packs are pretty standard now. The RIT bags are all pretty standard, I think, in most cases, unless it's a homegrown. If you're buying a commercial RIT bag, there is some standardization there. So I think that has some merit and so forth. Chief Hall?
I think it behooves anybody that's in the process of creating RIT policy, creating their RIT companies, getting the equipment for said companies, check with the surrounding jurisdictions with whom they're going to share mutual aid. I know as a chief, I did that with my surrounding communities to make sure that, for instance, breathing apparatus was compatible, hose connections were compatible, so forth and so on. I think that has to be thought of beforehand.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be done on the front end. Chief Cagno, did you have a point you wanted to make?
Yeah, I'd like to add to all going to as far as equipment and compatibility. You know, there's a lot of training out there nowadays, a lot of YouTube videos of different RIT techniques, you know, using harnesses, webbing, and stuff like that to drag firefighters, carry firefighters. A lot of that's misleading. You and I had a discussion about this the other day. You know, you drag a firefighter with a piece of webbing across an apparatus floor, you've pretty much reduced the coefficient of friction to zero. Do the same thing over 2 or 3 mattresses, and it's not happening. So as well as compatibility, I think the training needs to be a little more realistic.
Well, I think that, yeah, that's always been a problem. I'll quote my friend Joe Steins, who says the greatest freelancing in the American fire service is in the classroom. And you just have to spend 15 minutes on social media and you will know that everybody's got an opinion. Whether or not that's an accepted policy or not an accepted policy remains to be seen, but certainly everybody has an opinion. The question came up. So one of the things is that what's the truth? What's the numbers? What does the rapid intervention thing look like? I've actually just reached out to Don Abbott to be a guest on my podcast. Don is doing what's called the Mayday Project. Probably 3 weeks ago, Chief Goldfeder put something out in the secret list with some of the statistical data. So you can go back and see that from Chief Goldfeder, and hopefully, shameless plug, I'll have Chief Abbott on to talk about some of that. But the Mayday Project, I think it is a website actually. Before, if somebody else jumps in here for a second, I can actually give you the website. So I think I can give you that website for the listeners that are out there. But the Mayday Project does have data about that. I am a believer that I think that an intact crew, just on the training perspective, I said this a couple of weeks ago and I got a lot of comments about it. It's just been a pet peeve of mine and I never could get my arms around it. I'm sad to say I never fixed it. But when you do two things that Chief Cagno just said about training, and that is this. The first one is this. How many times have you done a Mayday drill where you're taking somebody up a set of stairs, and for lack of better term, it's a push-pull, right? Somebody's got legs over the shoulders pushing, somebody's pulling, push-pull. You get to the top of the stairs and you say, okay, you guys are done. You're good. Next crew, go ahead and get started. Who the heck said the top of the stairs was a safe place? I mean, that, you know, we're training to a piece of the rescue. That's one thing. And the second thing is we claim as a fire service that we've minimized freelancing. If that's the case, then we should be training to recover a 3-person crew. And I'll tell you what, that's a whole different RIT operation. That's a whole nother world. If we're serious, we could lose a whole crew. You know, Bryceland Street, we lost the crew through the stairway or whatever, and we lost 3 firefighters. You know, we're still losing them one at a time, so they're not always an intact crew that gets lost. But the training and what we're training for, and somebody mentioned the statistics. That's how we got on this. And I think that the statistics should be leading us in some direction. It should be leading us in some direction, I would hope. Chief Pernesti.
Yeah, the Mayday project, for anybody listening that's unaware, it's a great piece of information. And what I love most about it is that he breaks it down: paid, volunteer. So it really does give you some good data. Crazy, and it's probably on that rant in the beginning, is that we just think that we can just fire a gun off, just take off and go inside. And one of the best examples of that failing is probably a line of duty death that took place in Texas in a VFW hall a few years back, where the killed was that they didn't have water. Killed the RIT crew, or one of the RIT crews, and burned 2 of the other seriously injured the other 2 members. I guess my point is, a good enough job, in my opinion, of having the RIT crew size things up. We just think, okay, they're just going to run in there and be an automatic save. You could just be adding more victims if they're not trained.
Well, I think that's valid. I got a piece. We'll talk about timeline in a minute. Chief Cagno, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'd like to add to what Chief Benetti is saying. Depending on the situation and the environment that they're going into, a RIT company could be totally ineffective. They might not even be able to get through the threshold of the door, let alone get into the building to remove a firefighter. He brings up a very valid point. It's not the end all be all. We can have a 10-member fast company or RIT company on a scene, and they might be totally ineffective because it's a total rescue operation. If you had a partial collapse, maybe somebody went to a floor, rapid fire drill, all of them things is going to change the environment and the perspective on whether or not a RIT company is going to be effective. So yeah, he brings up a very valid point. It's not the solution. It's great to have them there, and we should have them there. But to what degree are they going to be effective, depending on the situation that unfolds that requires them to be put into operation?
Well, and I also think that building size, a residential versus a commercial is a whole different animal. It may take you a long time to get to where you're going. I do agree with Chief Pernesti. Don't underestimate the line. You need the hose line as well. For folks that are listening, it is projectmayday.net is the website, projectmayday.net. It's not .com. Lane, dive in.
Yeah, well, this almost gets back to the original topic in that, like when we were talking about what's in the RIT tool cache, we don't have a hard and fast rule of what's supposed to be in there, and the guidance is it depends on the type of building. Obviously, wood frame, a chainsaw is going to be more effective. If it's concrete and steel, you want a rotary saw and what have you, but it has to be mobile enough to actually get to the point of engagement. If you're putting Hearst tools on there and a bunch of other stuff, that's great, but you're not going to be able to get to where you can engage, which kind of raises the original question is what are you expecting your RIT team to do? I mean, to be honest, I look at them as mainly just a delivery service for that RIT bag. You know, my game plan is always to reinforce them heavily, because I know that 3 or 4 people with some tools really are just the very beginning of the operation. I mean, depending on whose study you read, it takes anywhere between 10 and 15 firefighters to rescue one.
Right, exactly. And, you know, a lot of people are saying that the initial, no, I shouldn't say initial RIT team, I'm jumping the shark here, that the rapid intervention team is the recon. They got to get in there, find the person, deliver the bag, and then there may be a secondary or third team that actually, you know, takes place in extraction and getting the person out. Let's just do a little experiment here, if you don't mind, guys. I think we're at the right place in the discussion to do this. We're going to have a little discussion about this and see where we go with this. I'm going to ask for the panel's help here as we take a look at this. So from the time, so let's just look at those first 2 blocks. And what I'm actually looking at is the space between these blocks. What I'm actually looking at is the space between these blocks. From the time the first due engine sets the brakes to the time standard attack and search, they cross the threshold, they're doing an interior operation. What is that number, folks? Anybody on the panel, just tell me how long that is in real life. From the time they park, just, you know, see 3 sides, do all the stuff they're supposed to do until a crew is inside the building operating, whether it's fire, attack, or search. How many, what's the time? Just shout it out.
Yeah, 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 to 4.
All right, 3 to 4. And this is not rocket science. In your world, and we've got a wide variation, after that crew crosses the threshold, what is the time for the rapid intervention team? How far behind you are they typically?
8 to 10.
That's a high one.
I'll say 5.
So can we get, so we got an 8 to 10, we got a 5. Can we get a consensus?
Yeah, I mean, my company's coming from another town. It's always a mutual aid company. So that's where my delay is.
Sure. No, that's fine. Because that's real life, right? We want to talk about real life. So you want to split the difference? We're at 5 to 10. So let's go 7. Can we agree on 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Sure.
5 to 7.
I think, you know, depending on where you are in an urban area or not. So the RIT team arrives. How long does it take them to get 3 sets of jaws of life, 4 saws, two Stokes baskets, and whatever else they got? What is the RIT team setup time from the time they arrive to the time they report to the commander on the Alpha side? What's that number?
Well, my department's prepackaged.
Yeah. So it's 2 to 3 minutes before they walk up.
About that.
All right. Let's say 3 minutes.
I'd go with that.
Yep, no problem.
All right. So we're going to skip the next one, the recognition of firefighter emergency. I'm going to skip that because I got something to say about that in a minute. So somebody does realize that there is a mayday. The mayday gets called, something comes up. How long does it take you to get that RIT team across the front threshold?
Well, my guy.
That depends on how the incident commander manages the mayday.
Well, let's just come up with an answer. Charlie, what were you going to say?
Well, in my department, everybody had their own radio. Every riding position had a radio, so they're going to hear it. And before they're told to deploy, or ordered to deploy by the IC, they're already going to be moving towards their point of entry.
All right.
And with the blessing, if you will, of the IC, they're going to make entry.
Is it 2 minutes? Is it 3 minutes?
I'm going to give it a minute.
All right, 1 minute. They cross it. Now, for the purpose of this discussion, so we have a frame of reference, this is a 2.5-story wood frame building. They have to locate a member. It's a mayday, and you don't have an exact location. So a 3-person team, as we discussed, has to locate a member. Now, I know this is a variable, but let's put a working number on
it. Well, that number can be up there. You know, I don't think you gave enough information, Pete, because if I'm a fast truck officer and I expect my incident commander to be able to tell me what unit he was from, what position he was, and where he was in that building operating. So if I have no idea of what he was doing, where he was, or who I'm looking for, my number is going to be much higher than if I know if I'm looking for the backup man on the first due line on the first floor is having chest pain.
Well said. But I think, you know, I talked about this, the folks that study, you know, past fires and what have you. You know, Boston Fire loses a guy, and the only words they ever heard on the radio were 15 strapped. And that was Steve Menahan, and they were in a warehouse. So you don't always have that. So give me a range, Rob. I don't disagree with you. If you got a good report and it's easy and we know what it is,
yep.
We've had a partial ceiling collapse. We've had something going on. So we can maybe get up the stairs and find this person. It's probably 2 bedrooms up there, maybe a half bath. So how long does it take from when they cross the threshold to locate somebody in a heavy smoke condition with fire progressing?
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to actually say it depends on what stage of the fire that this Mayday is called that I have to go get somebody. If it's initial, I mean, you know, you could be talking 3 to 4 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes.
Anybody else want to dive in? He's saying 3 to 4.
Yeah, if the RIT company's doing their due diligence, Chief, a couple of things should be happening. First of all, they should be listening to the radio, anticipating a potential problem. They should have already identified routes to access different floors and different sides. That being said, that would minimize the amount of time it would take for them to maybe locate a firefighter. So if they're paying attention to the radio, they've reconned a couple of things and did some intelligence. You know, and they should be talking amongst themselves. You know, it sounds like Engine 1 and Ladder 1 are having trouble in the rear. If things go bad, we're going to use side B or whatever. You know, that would minimize the time. So, yeah, it could be 3 to 5.
That's it. Chief Cagno has a great point. Nobody says that the entire rapid intervention team needs to be standing on the front lawn right next to the incident commander. So a sharp fast truck boss may send his outside team to one of the exposures or to the rear of the building that's been laddered. If I have somebody that's going to go, you know, if I need to get into the 2-3 corner on the second floor and I happen to have a ladder there, I might send my guy to get in that window and get real fast access, because we've all been in fires. Are the stairs usually clear? That's usually where everybody decides they want to hang out.
I get it. But let's not go tactical here. We just, so let's say 3 to 4 minutes. Now he's got, it's an old house. He's got wooden plaster. He's got basically a ceiling on top of him. He's got some plaster lath. He's not trapped, but there's miscellaneous crap on top of him. And he has to now be extricated under this, you know, 10 by 12 worth of plaster and lath that came down on him, and he's got to be delivered out to the front lawn. How long does
that could take 15 minutes to a half hour, Chief, realistically. It also depends on, are we just locating them and making them comfortable until we can get additional resources there, or does he actually have to be removed because of injuries or because of, you know, impinging fire and heat or something? So I think it depends on different things. There's too many variables.
I'm talking about the bottom block center. The RIT team extricates them. They get the plaster, the junk, and the crap off of them. And then the last piece is they're going to cross the threshold and get them out of the building.
Is he 350 pounds? I mean, I can't answer that. I honestly...
Is he just stuck where he's saying, hey, guys, get me the hell out of here, and he's fine?
Okay.
Yeah,
So take that scenario. There's still an amount of time here is what I'm trying to get to. There's an amount of time.
yeah, absolutely. It
We
could be
can-
anywhere from,
We can what if until we throw up. Let's just get a basic sense of some time. Charlie, I got to get all this debris off of this guy.
I'm going to go back what Chief Gagno said. You could be looking at half hour, 40 minutes maybe, depending upon the length and breadth of this of the extrication. And it'll be a miracle if the original RIT team is able to get him through over the threshold. Usually, my feeling with that is if a RIT team can get somebody to a more or less a shelter in place type of situation, or at least make them safe with deployment of a hose line and bring an extra air bottle so that individual has plenty of breathing air. I'd be really surprised if the original RIT company is the ones that cross the threshold with the guy they're going after. That boggles my mind. I can see 2 or 3 RIT teams being involved in a firefighter extrication.
Okay, makes some sense. Makes some sense. So let's go to let's see if we can get to where we wanted to go with this, and that is this. You notice the middle block, I never talked about the recognition of a firefighter emergency. But in theory, we were at 4 and 7 is 11, 3 is 14, a minute is 15, 3 to 4 is 18, and as much as 15. So you're at 33 minutes. Let's assume that they were searching for 10 when they got into trouble. They don't have any air. Yeah, you're bringing them a RIT pack. I get it. But the time, there is no time. Once you've done this in a normal set of circumstances, there is no time. And that's one of the things that I think we get in trouble with. And the time that you were talking about, listen, I'm not stupid. I know there's 100 variables here. I get it. How many people are doing 15-minute status reports? Suppose you don't get the Mayday. Suppose it's a medical emergency and somebody doesn't pay attention. We may not even know. That person could be out of air before we even get there. And many times that's the case. Go ahead. Was it Chief Cagno had a question?
Yeah, there was a very famous incident. I'm not going to mention the department, where a firefighter was trapped by just a kink in the hose that was wrapped around his foot. And that was a lengthy extrication. All they had to do was just, use a Sawzall or a knife or something like that and cut through the line. They would have had him out in rapid order. But, they couldn't see or access or whatever the situation was. They just didn't know. So, here is a situation where the entrapment itself was a simple operation, but locating and finding exactly what was causing it took an extended amount of time.
Well, I agree. I don't think we always have a clear picture. I think that's part of the problem. Yes, we need a team for something that goes wrong. A lot of discussion in the chat room. Did the guy fall through a hole? Is he in the basement? That's different from a guy who twists his ankle. That's different from a guy who has a heart attack. Or a gal or whatever, a crew member, it doesn't really matter. So there are a million variables here. But as we go, so let me ask you, the question that Lane posed at square one was, what is our expectation versus what is the reality? And I don't think we really wrapped our arms around that yet. What is the expectation of the RIT team? We've had a couple of comments and a couple of discussions. Well, I think, Charlie just mentioned in this last one, I don't think the original RIT team is going to get them out. I think it's somebody else supporting that original RIT team. And I'm absolutely on board with that. I think that's spot on. So I guess as commanders, what is your expectation? The standard says it. There's a standard of care that says we'll have a RIT team. As the IC, what is your expectation of what's going to happen? Chief Pernesti.
Yeah, I think my expectation, I boils down to 2 things. Urgency, and I can get that person out, we're going to get them out. But if I can't, of those 3-member RIT crew, is to get them air and continue it, protect them, that person or people in trouble. as best I can. And I think that's the best I can expect 3 people to do. Share them with water. And again, a medical emergency, have that person and go as best you can. But those are my 2. Is it medical that I can grab and go? Not, then those 3 people are gonna get them air and water.
Yeah, no, I think that's very valid. That's a very reasonable expectation. Defend in place, keep them, secure them. I think many of the panel actually have said that previously. Rob Fling.
I think as an incident commander that we have to keep certain things in perspective. One of them is I always liked firefighter assistant search team better than rapid intervention team. Rapid intervention, I get the meaning of it where, hey, I have a company that can move rapidly to assist a firefighter. But if we look at statistics and we really have a problem outside of somebody who may just be turned around in the building or may need a little help getting out because they're running a little low on air, rapid intervention, more often than not, is anything but rapid. And to have an unreasonable expectation of something happens inside this building and I have a real problem, that they're going to be outside in anything under 15 to 20 minutes or even longer, depending on the problem and the size of the building, is just unreasonable.
No, well said, Rob. I there's no discussion from me on that one. Chief Cagno.
I think we had the theoretical RIT concept, and then we had the reality of what a RIT company can perform or what their expectations are. And I think this, and I don't know who said it earlier, it's like a false prophet. It was something designed to give us a sense of security, a false sense of security at that. But to expect a 3 or 4 person company to actually affect the rescue of a downed firefighter that's either partially trapped or unconscious, and remove him from the building is far too much for 3 or 4 people. We all know that. So I think it's a theoretical issue where we come up with a standard or a practice or a procedure that we think is going to make us feel better each time we have them assigned, and nothing happens. But then when something does happen and they can't affect the rescue, well, now we have a problem. So there's the theoretical concept and what they can actually do.
Yeah, let's just, before we get too far away, I do have, in the chat room, we did have a minor mayday. Deputy Chief Hine was trapped with a computer update. That's a whole different kind of RIT team. I'm not sure how we handled that, but he's with us in the chat room now. So thanks for joining us, Deputy. I appreciate it. But what you said, that, listen, this is not a theoretical maybe. I mean, I agree that there's difference between reality and expectation. Let's call it as we see it. There have been saves by RIT teams. We can't say this is Puff the Magic Dragon here. There have been saves by RIT teams. We can argue if there's enough. We can argue how quick, how fast, how whatever. But we cannot, certainly I'm not going to, on this panel, I'm not going to dismiss a RIT team. I think it's got to be there. But I think that, we just had, is the RIT team that's on scene going to protect in place? Valid point. Chief Fling talked about, can we split that RIT team and have companies on side B, C, and what? Absolutely. Can we go in by ladder versus stairs? There's no question. There's a lot of ways tactically to make this work. But I think, and I think this is great discussion, because I think we are talking about, for the young incident commanders or even the experienced incident commanders, you better get your idea of what your expectation is right up front. I think the biggest word, you know, when we said expectations versus reality, I think expectation is probably the key word that should be capitalized in that sentence, because I think we pointed out a lot of stuff here that's important. Lane, you've been silent for a couple minutes. What are you thinking?
Well, a couple things. Yeah, you know, we talk about the incident commander's preparations. We developed a checklist, and that sits on the command board, and that's, you know, it's nice when, you know, one of my hobbies is aviation, and you know, when things get bad, you need that short little, you can only do so much from memory, and it's nice to have that checklist to jog your memory on the rest of it. And yeah, because I realized that once a mayday occurs, that whatever my plan was, that's out the window. And if you know, if you've ever seen the movie Black Hawk Down, when the helicopter crashes and the general looks up and he goes, you know what, we just lost the initiative. And I fully expect if a mayday occurs that I've lost the initiative, the entire objective of the mission has changed. I'm going to be redeploying resources all over the fire ground and reinforcing the RIT team. And yeah, it's going to be a very a busy situation, and having a checklist to fall back on is a nice thing to have.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, we just did we did a podcast on that. Shameless plug. I did a podcast on the incident commander and a Mayday thing. I talked about two very minor instances that I had, but absolutely, I think that you're not. You know, that's the epitome of the Gordon Graham. It is a high risk, low frequency. We're not handling enough Maydays. You're not. May the Lord help us. I hope none of us ever get good enough to handle Maydays, because we've done it so many times. Something's probably, you know, stay away from guys that have that much bad luck. But I think that, you know, that absolutely a checklist is a very, very viable thing. And I think it locks you on when you're that disoriented from a catastrophe. I agree. Let's start summarizing here. What, you know, let's speak directly to the viewers now. The title was Rapid Intervention, Expectations versus Reality. Let's give the viewers something to take away with, so they've got something to hang on to after watching this episode. So does somebody want to lead? I don't want to put somebody on the spot there. So Chief Pernesti, let's start summarizing as we go here.
I'm going to talk to the young incident commander or the commander. Number one, you need to practice how you're going to handle a Mayday. All for checklists. I can only focus on smaller departments, and I think it's the small town commander that can really be in a bind when there is a Mayday. I think your expectations are two things: air and water. And you have to practice yourself how you're going to handle talk on a radio, how you're going to assign crews. I put in the chat room, one thing that small town commanders forget is when they have a larger ordinary constructed, the typical kind of structure, we'll send interior crews in. Construction is such that you could probably do an offensive fight. They forget that they may need crews on A and C sides, or multiple crews. It's all those little things that you need to prepare for ahead of time. Listen to too many of fires where it's going downhill and you know it. So, in practice.
Well said, Chief. Well said. And you are a huge fan, as everybody knows, and I am also a huge proponent of simulations. And don't build your own. Have somebody else build you a simulation, put you through it, and see how you're going to react to that. I think that's you know, an invaluable tool. And you know, as Lane just said, from the air, you know, flying people, you work on a simulator before you jump in the plane, I think. So you know, that's probably a good idea. Chief Hall, what's your summary statement after doing tonight's episode, and what do we want to leave the listeners with?
I'll speak for myself here, Chief, but my expectation and my reality as far as rapid intervention are much the same. And I think I stated it before, but it bears repeating. My expectation of my rapid intervention company is going to be to locate, protect, and stabilize, and give the next companies that I'm going to send in the best location that they can, best and safest location, if you will, in order to make it to where that downed firefighter or firefighters are. So my expectation, my reality are intertwined.
Very good. Very good. And we're starting to build a summary statement for the crew. So we're talking about locate, support, water, air. You know, we're starting to build a system here. Chief Cagno, what do you got for a summary statement for the people viewing?
Well, since everybody caught the usual stuff, I would add to that that the incident commander has to do everything in his power to utilize actionable intelligence based on the situation he's confronted with to almost anticipate the need for having to deploy a fast company or RIT team in the event something goes wrong. So, you know, if you pull up to the commercial block and you got trouble, you should be, you know, calling for adequate resources well in advance and anticipating the usual fight, especially if you don't do them all the time.
You know, well said. I think I fell victim to that more than once. You pull up, it seems like a routine job, and you have in your mind, we've got this. We're not going to have a Mayday. And I think that's an easy way to go down the tube. So I think that's another great one we can add to our list we're building is expect trouble. Expect trouble. Don't be paranoid. Don't be paralyzed, but expect some trouble, I think is a good piece of advice.
I hate the comment that help is only as far as the radio away. I can't stand that comment. Bring them in early, have them staged. Even if you don't use them, you can send them back later. But certainly don't call them to the scene when the problem occurs.
Yeah, no, I think if you're calling companies after the Mayday started, sure, you should call for a greater alarm. I get that. But if you're calling for them as the help, you're probably in the wrong place. Chief Fling, what do you got for a summary statement?
It's good. Some good stuff tonight, gentlemen. I'll tell you. But one of the things that I try to keep in the back of my head is every new job treat like I don't want to say it's your first fire because you need that experience that's behind you. But you know, if you go to private dwelling fires 95% of the time, and then that 1% of the time you roll up onto a factory fire or a large commercial or a taxpayer or something, don't treat it like it's a private dwelling like you've done the other 100 times. You know, you might have to call 2, maybe 3 rapid intervention teams to cover this building to cut your time frame down. Don't be afraid to speak to your fast truck officer. You know, they may just sit there and think that their job is just to sit there in case something happens. Don't be afraid. Say, hey, you know what? Hey, did you do your size up? Did you loop this building? Did you see what's going on back there? You got bars on the 3 sides, you know. You may ask them, hey, could you do me a favor? Could you pull a couple of ladders off of my truck and throw some ladders on the 2 and 4 side in case I got to get in or somebody's got to get out? Talk to them. You never know. Everybody, especially with me, because in a volunteer department, I don't know what I'm getting. So I want to kind of have some kind of judge of what I got before I need to put them to work. You know, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but, you know, I want to know what I'm dealing with before I need to know that I have to deal with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you know, the volunteer department, you get a different, you know, you get a different mindset. And, you know, the other thing that this is going to sound bad, and I don't want this to sound bad because I started as a young volunteer firefighter, and it's not a volunteer. I've even seen it on the career side. Who is going to get trapped in your fire department? Probably one of the best interior firefighters you have, because they're going to go in the farthest, the deepest. They're going to be doing the job, and they're going to be in a critical place. That's who's going to get trapped. I guess the question I would leave with the audience, who does that leave on the front lawn as the rapid intervention crew? And you know, I'm not being derogatory, but that's probably the worst position you're ever going to be in a firefight. It's going to be an emotional position. It's going to be deteriorating conditions. There's not a lot of good things happening there. So you really need the best of your best. And when you have, you know, I go back to Charlie's point, when you have mutual aid companies, you really don't know what you're going to get there for sure. And Lane, since you started it, let's have you help clean it up here.
Well, if you're looking for your desired end state of that firefighter getting rescued out of the building, the Mayday firefighter, it's a team effort. The rapid intervention crew is just one small part of it. It comes down to the firefighter survival skills that firefighter carries with him into the building prior to the Mayday. It's the supervision or leadership of the rapid intervention crew. You know, the chief or the captain operating at the actually commanding the RIC operation. The incident commander having the agility to make the adjustments, and even up to the folks sitting up in the communication center. They're a key part of the successful operation.
Well done. Nice summary. I'm going to have you do the summary every week. Great stuff. Well, thank you everyone on the panel. Thank you for the folks that are listening. You know, members of the panel, this gets up there. It's on, it's the YouTube link, not the link I sent you, but the YouTube link is there. In fact, I'll put that in the chat room for you. And, you know, put this out. This was a good show, and we put out a lot of good information from some experienced guys. So I appreciate each and every one of you. And for those watching, join us here next week, 8 p.m. on Sunday evening. We'll have a different topic, and hopefully we'll get to see you next week.